Good morning. Good morning. I trust that everyone had a wonderful evening at our annual PACE reception last night. So for the past 44 years, PACE has provided us with the opportunity to connect with our legislators and our state and federal partners to make Maryland's political leadership aware of Allegany and Garrett Counties' needs and priorities. For those of you who are new to this event, welcome. For those of you who are returning, welcome back, and we appreciate your continued support. I'd also like to extend a special welcome to those who are joining us this morning via live stream. The breakfast is being live streamed this morning by Allegany Media and is available to be viewed via Facebook, YouTube, and the Mountain Maryland website. I'm Courtney Thomas Winterberg. I am the director of the Allegany County Department of Social Services, and I am serving as your MC for the breakfast. We're fortunate to have several guests with us this morning, including United States Senators Benjamin Cardin and Chris Van Hollen, Congressman David Trone, and Comptroller Peter Franchot, who will all be giving remarks. We are also honored to welcome Maryland's new Senate President, Bill Ferguson, as our keynote speaker this morning. Before I invite our speakers to the podium, I'd like to acknowledge our local elected officials who have joined us this morning, beginning with our Western Maryland delegation, who serves as our voice here in Annapolis. Delegate Mike McKay, Delegate Jason Buckle, Delegate Wendell Beitzel, and State Senator George Edwards. Thank you for representing our needs so well. I would also like to recognize Mark Widmeyer, Western Maryland's representative to the Governor's Office of Intergovernmental Affairs, for all of his work that he does on behalf of our communities. Just under 600 individuals have joined us over the last 2 days, and inclusive of that is a record number of delegates and state senators from around the state of Maryland who came out to learn about Western Maryland. Thank you for joining us. If you are here this morning, I know session starts early, could you please stand to be recognized? Okay. Well, they ate and run. Well, they have really strict guidelines to be in session. So we'd also like to recognize members of the Governor's Cabinet who have been with us for the last 2 days. And if you're here for the breakfast, I know I saw a number of them last evening walking through, if you could also stand to be recognized. So John Wobensmith, Secretary of State. Ronna Kramer, Secretary of the Department of Aging. Joseph Bartenfelter, Secretary of Agriculture. David Brinkley, Secretary of Budget and Management. Kelly Schultz, Secretary of Commerce. Carol Beatty, Secretary of Disabilities. Ben Grumbles, Secretary of Environment. Ellington Churchill, Secretary of General Services. Robert Neal, Secretary of Health. Ken Holt, Secretary of Housing and Community Development. Lourdes Padilla, Secretary of the Department of Human Services. Sam Abed, Secretary of Juvenile Services. Tiffany Robinson, Secretary of Labor. Jeannie Hadaway-Riccio, Secretary of the Department of Natural Resources. Robert McCord, Secretary of Planning. Robert Green, Secretary of Public Safety and Correctional Services. Gregory Slater, Acting Secretary of Transportation. William Palazzi, Secretary of State Police. And I know that we have Wendy Peters, Special Secretary of Smart Growth, with us. George Owens, Secretary of Veterans Affairs. George Fiedler, Secretary of Higher Education. We thank you for all of your support of our counties. Our first speaker is a third-generation Marylander and he's been a national leader on healthcare, retirement security, the environment, and fiscal issues while representing the people of Maryland in the U.S. Senate, and before that in the House of Representatives. He's worked across party lines to further U.S. national security and to ensure that good governance, transparency, and respect for human rights are integrated into American policy efforts. First elected to the Senate in 2006, Senator Cardin currently serves as the ranking member of the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee. He's a senior member of the Senate Foreign Relations and Environment and Public Works Committee. He also serves on the Senate Finance Committee. Senator Cardin is a leading advocate for the Chesapeake Bay, which is the economic, historical, and cultural heart of Maryland. Nationally, he's a champion for protecting our clean air and water. He has introduced legislation to restore health to America's great water bodies and is the leading proponent in investing in improvements to America's aging water infrastructure system while preparing for its impact of climate change. His commitment to reduce pollution and protect our environment fuels his work to broaden investments in safe public transit as well as walking and biking trails. Senator Cardin has a deep interest in foreign affairs and has worked across party lines to further our national security and protect universal human rights. He also believes in access to quality, affordable health care and believes it should be a right, not a privilege. He continues to be a strong supporter of the Affordable Care Act, which brought the United States closer to this goal. He led the fight for the Patient's Bill of Rights, and because of his effort, that law ensures that individuals in private health insurance plans have the right to choose their primary care provider, women have direct access to an OBGYN, and patients with medical emergencies are guaranteed necessary coverage for ER visits. He was responsible for the elevation of the National Institute for Minority Health Disparities at the National Institutes of Health and has been a strong supporter of increasing funding for federally qualified health centers and health information technology. One of his proudest accomplishments was leading the fight to guarantee access to dental care for children in the Children's Health Insurance Program, following the tragic loss of a 12-year-old Prince George's County boy who died from complications that followed an untreated tooth infection. Serving as a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee during his first 4 years in the Senate, Senator Cardin has also developed a reputation for defending civil rights at home and has sought to find balance between protection of civil rights and national security. He's the lead sponsor of legislation to prohibit racial profiling by all levels of law enforcement, restore voting rights for former felons, and remove the deadline for ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment. He's also a proud co-sponsor of the Respect for Marriage Act and the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. Please welcome U.S. Senator Ben Cardin.
Courtney, thank you for that very kind introduction. It's nicer than I get when I'm in Washington, so thank you very much. And Courtney, as I said, our thoughts were with you, so our best. So why am I here? What's going on in Washington? Anything? There's only 2 United States senators this morning that could be in their state capitals for a breakfast like this. It's great to represent the state of Maryland, let me tell you. So I know Chris Van Hollen and I can safely look for other places to be than in D.C. during these times. And it allows us to get grounded. I am really spoiled because I go home every night, and it gives me a chance to get grounded in Maryland, considering everything that's going on in Washington. So even on Monday night when we finished at 2 a.m. in the morning, I was home at 3 a.m. No traffic at 2 a.m. It really is a pleasure to represent the state of Maryland in the United States Congress. And Robin will have to correct me, but I don't think I've missed many of these breakfasts. I think I've been 0. Okay, never missed any. Thank you, Robin. And there's a reason for that. As I think I told you, from my early days, the western part of our state, Mountain Maryland, has always been a place that has been very special to me. I remember some of the best memories of my very young children as we were camping in Harrington Manor State Park. We had an annual visit there, and it was how my children got their first taste and experience with nature. We learned how to ski at WISP, And we didn't ski very well at the Wisp, but we did. That's where we first started our skiing. We hiked the C&O Canal. I biked the C&O Canal. I can't claim I biked the whole C&O Canal. I think I did it from Frostburg to Cumberland. We did that downhill. That was the easy part. So I've done that. And then where else can you find a 5-star lodging than Savage River Lodge? I mean, it's a great area. And I'm very proud of the accomplishments that take place there. Frostburg State University is doing fabulous, and the different things they're doing for not only the region, but they're training to help our entire state. Garrett College, Allegany College. These are, to me, what makes this area so special. And the challenge, and I've talked to many of you about this, you want to preserve this unique way of life. And I want to preserve Western Maryland and Mountain Maryland. But you also know you need to have economic opportunity for your children and grandchildren to be able to stay and continue to build upon the reputation of Mountain Maryland. So that's our challenge. How do we marry that together? So let me start by saying that as the senior senator from Maryland, I try to use all the resources I can to help in regards to all parts of Maryland, but today in regards to our Mountain Maryland. And I'm very proud of my federal partners. Chris Van Hollen, who will be here shortly, as I understand. Oh, he's right there, okay. Who came in on cue. It's been an incredible partner. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of your top priorities and Chris's leadership on the Appropriations Committee to make sure that we got the funds. Well, let me mention right now the ARC funding. There was a time the president tried to zero that out. We got more money in this year's budget than last. Thank you, Chris, for your leadership on that issue within the Appropriations Committee. President tried to zero out the EDA funding. We've got that funding there. The point is that we have bipartisan support. I was asked by an interview before I came in if I could bring some Republicans, who would I bring here? And I mentioned Roger Wicker from Mississippi, a Republican, a friend of both Chris and mine. We partnered with him. He's part of the ARC region. So we had bipartisan support to make sure we have funding. And then our champion in the House of Representatives, David Trone. He is doing a fabulous job representing all parts of his district. And let me tell you something. Representing his district geographically is almost as challenging as representing the entire state. And he does it representing every area of his district with the same degree of priority and energy. And let me just give you one example. One of the top priorities is broadband and connection. We do have the superhighway. We don't have the last mile connections. We got to do a better job. David's taken the leadership on this, bringing us all together to figure out how we can use ARC funds, how we can use Department of Agricultural funds, how can we connect all communities. It's just one example of how Congressman Trone has really taken the leadership to make sure that we all work together to help Mountain Maryland, and I'm very proud to be part of this Team Maryland. I go through many of the priorities that we're fighting for. I'm glad transportation's here. Robin's trying to make a connection, it looks like back there, to make sure we get the money for the North-South Highway. We have funds coming. We've been fighting for this for a while. I am proud of the work that we did to help Pennsylvania with its toll credits. But we've got to get more funds into these highway programs, and we don't have enough specific dedicated funds to complete all these projects. So we have to find more creative ways. And we are looking for funding at the national level. Both Senator Van Hollen and I serve on the Environment and Public Works Committee. I'm the senior Democrat on the Infrastructure Committee. And we will be passing a transportation bill shortly. And we're going to make sure that there are provisions in that bill to be able to complete the highway systems we need in Appalachia, USA. So we're going to fight to make sure that we continue to fund and make a priority the transportation programs, because it connects people to jobs, We recognize that, and it's an important part of the economic future of that region. We are fighting to make sure that we preserve the environment. We were all just so devastated with the Luke Mill closing. It was terrible. You know, it was terrible for many reasons. There were good jobs there. It was history. It was part of the culture. And the workers there were the best in the world. They didn't lose their jobs because they couldn't compete. They lost their jobs because of corporate decision making. And it's something we have to work on in this country. Decision was made. Team Maryland worked together. I want to thank Governor Hogan and his team. We worked with them. I want to thank the local officials. I want to thank, again, my federal partners. David Trone immediately was on the ground with us to bring us all together, Chris Van Hollen and myself. The first thing we could do at the federal level is to make sure that trade adjustment assistance was available to the workers. Doesn't come automatically. These are federal funds. Guess what? I learned this morning that if you go to Allegany College, you're going to find 20 or 30 former workers at Luke that are now at the college getting the skills they need under TAA, Trade Adjustment Assistance. We have an environmental issue there. I can tell you, we're going to stay on top of that. We won't tolerate polluting our waters. And we'll do everything we can to make sure that the law is complied with. And yes, we'll work with the local officials, and we'll work with the state officials. Team Maryland will fight to make sure that we get that done. We recognize that recreation is one of the key economic tools of Mountain Maryland. So yes, we're going to get the rewatering of the in Cumberland, Canal Place. I have a vested interest. My office is located there. So I want to make sure that I can be able to get everything all the recreation I need from the rewatering. We're going to get that done. We're going to fight hard for those types of issues. We were very successful in getting funding coming to these projects. Under ARC, we got funding coming in for Cumberland, for Baltimore Street. That's an economic engine. We hope that there will be a boutique hotel there. People want, one of the things I really enjoyed was taking my family to retrace the Underground Railroad. What a gem in Cumberland to see how that operates. We have gems there that we have to use for the benefit of the people of Mountain Maryland. We're going to fight to make sure those fundings are there to be able to do these types of partnerships. So there are a lot of other areas we could talk about. We have the autonomous vehicle track that's being sought for Frostburg. We're going to work to help you in regards to that partnership. We have the opioid funding. Probably $1 million was funded from federal government. Opioid crisis is in every community in our community, every community in our state. There's no one's immune from these problems. But we want to build this from the ground up. What works in your community, and to make sure the resources are there. We know you have to be able to deal with this 24/7. And when you're in a rural community, it's hard to be able to have services available 24/7. So we're working with you in regards to those initiatives. So let me just once again thank you for not only being here and giving me a distraction from Washington, but for what you do in bringing Mountain Maryland to Annapolis every year. It gives us a chance to really showcase what we have here in our state. Too many people sort of take this for granted and think will last forever. We know that we have to pay attention to the needs. And I am proud that we pay priority attention to your needs. It's not because you have the most votes, although I must tell you, George Edwards can make up for the other 46 members of the state Senate any time and his influence in that body. And your House delegation is very strong. It's because we are very proud that Maryland includes Mountain Maryland. And I'm proud to represent you in the United States Senate. Thank you all very much. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cardin. Each of our speakers today will be receiving a small token of our appreciation in the form of goods and products that are made in Allegany and Garrett County. And for the senators, they're receiving apple butter that is made from Garrett County's Castleman Inn, which has sat alongside the national roads since 1842. And also honey made from bees raised in Allegany County that were provided by entrepreneur Jeff McIntyre of Mountain Beekeepers Association. Before we introduce our next speaker, I have several more elected officials to acknowledge, beginning with our county commissioners. From Allegany County, Commissioner Creed Brody, Commissioner Dave Caparelli, and Commission President Jake Shade. From Garrett County, Commissioner Larry Tichenal, Commissioner Jim Heinbaugh, and Commission President Paul Edwards. We also have our county administrators from Allegany County, Brandon Butler, and Kevin Nall from Garrett County. Please welcome our State Treasurer, Nancy Kopp. Thank you for joining us this morning. Our next speaker was elected to the United States Senate by the people of Maryland in November of 2016. Chris Van Hollen is committed to fighting every day to ensure that our state and our country live up to their full potential of equal rights, equal justice, and equal opportunity. Senator Van Hollen believes that every child deserves the opportunity to pursue their dreams and benefit from a quality education, and that anyone who is willing to work hard should be able to find a good job. That's why his top priorities include creating more and better jobs, strengthening small businesses, and increasing educational and job training opportunities for individuals of all ages in all communities. Senator Van Hollen started his time in public service as a member of the Maryland State Legislature, where he became known as a tenacious advocate for everyday Marylanders and someone who was unafraid to take on powerful special interests on behalf of working people. In 2002, he was elected to represent Maryland's 8th Congressional District in the House of Representatives, where he served as a member of the Democratic leadership and was elected by his colleagues to be the ranking member of the House Budget Committee and protect vital interests like Social Security and Medicare. A tireless fighter for the people of Maryland, Senator Van Hollen has also become known for working hard to find common sense solutions to difficult national interests. In January 2015, he released a comprehensive plan to address the problem of growing inequality in America and provide a blueprint for building an economy that works for everyone. A goal that he will continue to fight for in the U.S. Senate, Senator Van Hollen is proud to have worked successfully with members of both parties to pass bipartisan legislation whenever possible on issues of common concern, including expanding medical research, protecting the Chesapeake Bay, fighting childhood cancer, and passing the ABLE Act to assist families with children with disabilities. Chris Van Hollen's a graduate of Swarthmore College, the John F. Kennedy School of Public Policy at Harvard University, and Georgetown University Law Center, where he attended night school. He and his wife, Catherine Wilkins, are the proud parents of 3 children. Please welcome Senator Chris Van Hollen.
Well, thank you, Courtney. Thank you for that nice introduction. Thank you for all your good work, and it is great to be with all of you. I'm sure Senator Cardin mentioned that it's great to start the day with all of you before heading down to Capitol Hill. And I'm going to keep this motto in mind for the whole day. Positive attitudes change everything. Hopefully that same sentiment will rest over the United States Capitol today. So thank you all very much for the invitation to be here. I think he had to leave, but I do want to thank and salute my partner in the United States Senate, the senior senator, Ben Cardin. We work very closely together. And as you could see and hear, he has sort of an encyclopedia, a very broad and deep sense of what's important in Western Maryland. Alleghany County and Garrett County, we work very closely. Great to be here with David Trone. I'm going to mention him in a minute again. But to all of you, the elected officials, from our commissioners who are on the ground every day dealing with immediate challenges, to the state legislators who are here, thank you for your leadership. It's always good to see my friend George Edwards. We served together in the House of Delegates and worked on a number of issues with respect to Western Maryland at that time. So George, very good to see you. And Nancy Kopp, the treasurer, you know, the money is right here, and thank you very much for your leadership, and to all of you today. And speaking of money, while we're in obviously we're going through a very serious proceeding in Washington, D.C., at least this year, we're not in the situation we were last year at this time, which was part of an unnecessary government shutdown. You may recall that that began in December and went into January. So the good news is actually that on a bipartisan basis, the Congress was able to pass its appropriation bills last year. And those bills provide very important investments in Maryland and many in Western Maryland. And I will say and underscore what Senator Cardin said. We work on a bipartisan basis on the Appropriations Committee. Yes, there are some differences on some things, but Shelley Moore Capito from West Virginia is on a lot of the subcommittees I serve on the Appropriations Committee. We work together on a lot of these things, including the Appalachian Regional Commission and the ARC funds. And I am pleased to report that this year that we increased the ARC funding by $10 million. Not a huge amount, but this is important money for a lot of the projects in Garrett and Alleghany County. And as all of you know, this is a matter of partnership. This is piecing together local funds with federal funds and sometimes contributions from either the private sector or nonprofits to make things work. Things like the new water and sewer mains in Grantsville, things like the new water treatment plant in Oakland, things like the very exciting makerspace in Cumberland, where you're going to see that partnership with Alleghany College and a number of really important workforce training programs, including the industrial manufacturing program. And I remember it wasn't that long ago that Senator Cardin and I were out in Garrett County with Garrett County health programs that had also been funded in part by ARC grants. So these funds are an important glue that make some of these investments work. And so I am pleased that we had an increase in those funds, and also that as part of, so that's on the Appropriations Committee I serve on. As Senator Cardin mentioned, we both serve on the Environment and Public Works Committee, which has the authorizing power with respect to ARC funding. And as part of the overall infrastructure bill that we passed out of that committee unanimously this year, it still hasn't been heard by the full Senate, but we passed the new America Infrastructure Act. That increases the authorization for ARC monies to $185 million a year. And that is another good news story as we look to the future. The funds that are available through the Appalachian Development Highway System, there's $100 million in dedicated funding. And I know there's a lot of frustration with the North-South Connector with 219. Pennsylvania is still lagging behind, but these funds should be helpful in getting Pennsylvania to do its part along with other funds because we want to work with you as a federal partner to make sure that that happens. We know that's very important. I should say that that America Infrastructure Act fund that I mentioned, including authorization for ARC funds, also contains authorizations for other, transportation programs. One of the things I worked hard to do was get a new program established authorizing funds for bridges. So where a local jurisdiction could actually apply directly for funding for bridge repair, which is a problem throughout Maryland and throughout the country. And so we're hopeful that that will remain in the bill as it travels through the legislative process. Broadband. high-speed internet, essential for connecting families and small businesses and healthcare systems in rural areas to the rest of the world, important for commerce, important for making sure that the generation that's going through our schools now can find opportunities and live and raise families and succeed economically in rural areas. It's essential lifeline. And David Trone really has been our point person in the delegation in that effort. I want to thank him. A few months ago, he convened an important meeting in Hagerstown, and we brought in one of the members of the FCC and had a comprehensive briefing. Many of you, I think, may have participated in that. But there are a number of federal programs. Obviously, the FCC and its mandates are important. And I want to stress that we push the FCC to make it very clear that we would not accept the statement that from carriers that they provided coverage, enough coverage in rural areas through just through their cell phone, often spotty cell phone. But that doesn't count as coverage. We're talking about high-speed internet. If you want to be, you need some fixed high-speed broadband in order to connect health systems and small businesses and community colleges and other colleges as well. So that is essential, and we push them, and now that is the definition. In addition to the FCC, there are, of course, programs through the USDA, through the Agricultural Bill, and we worked as a delegation to get funding specifically in Garrett County that helped connect about 2,000 homes to the internet. We look forward to continuing to work with you on that front, along with David Trone in the House as part of that partnership. And of course, when it comes to healthcare issues, we're continuing to face the opioid epidemic and challenge in Maryland and around the country. And we have also, on a bipartisan basis, the United States Congress worked to significantly increase funds for treatment, prevention, and dealing with that scourge in our communities, and David's been very involved in that as well. Let me just end on tourism. I love coming out to Western Maryland. Our family is also a camping family, an outdoors family, and always enjoy those recreational opportunities. Senator Cardin mentioned Cumberland and the canal effort, the river park effort, and I am pleased that there are about $600,000 in federal funds that are supporting the planning efforts there. Another example of the federal partnership in these efforts, and that's a great opportunity to bring more people to Cumberland and really make sure that that's the incredible magnet that it can and should be. The last thing I will say with respect to recreation, I always proudly wear my green Garrett Trails shirt, and when I'm hiking in Maryland, even when it's not in Western Maryland. Now, the last thing I'm going to say here is that I fish. I'm not a great angler, but I do fish. But I want to say, who's ever responsible for stocking Deep Creek Lake, I haven't been catching fish up there lately. I mean, I've been out there and I've been trying, maybe you all know the secrets, but for me, I really appreciate it for whoever is responsible for stocking that lake. I'd like to see some more fish. So even those who, I'm not an expert, but I'm not bad either. So I'm hoping next time I come to Deep Creek Lake, you guys can point me to the way to catch some more, and maybe by putting more in the lake to begin with, I'll have a better chance. Thank you all very, very much for all that you do. I do that.
I suggested the Castleman, since I know they stock that regularly.
Just tell me where the right place is.
Thank you. In addition to last evening's reception and this morning's breakfast, our county and local town and municipalities have a series of meetings, both preceding and following the official PACE events. These meetings have proven to be invaluable over the years because they provide an opportunity for our local, state, and federal officials to meet at once, work together through some of the issues, and discuss funding needs. So joining us today, who have been here the last 2 days for meetings, we have representatives from USDA, the U.S. Department of Small Business Administration, Appalachian Regional Commission, the Maryland Economic Development Corporation, the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development, and the Maryland Department of Environment. We also have elected officials from our towns and municipalities in Allegany County, from the cities of Frostburg and Cumberland, as well as the towns of Westernport, Lonaconee, Barton, Midland, and Luke. If you're here, would you please just stand to be recognized? And in Garrett County, we have representatives from the towns of Oakland, Mountain Lake Park, Grantsville, Friendsville, Accident, Loch Lynn, Deer Park, and Kitzmiller. Could you please stand to be recognized? In addition, we have representation from our Allegany and Garrett County Boards of Education, and our partners from higher education with representatives from Allegheny College of Maryland, Garrett College, and Frostburg State University. Our next speaker, Congressman David Trone, was elected in 2018 to serve Maryland's 6th congressional district, which includes all or part of Montgomery County, Frederick, Garrett, Allegheny, and Washington counties, a very diverse region. David serves on the Education and Labor, Foreign Affairs, and Joint Economic Committees, where he's fighting to make progress on issues that matter to Marylanders, including the opioid epidemic, criminal justice reform, and funding for mental health research. David grew up on a chicken and hog farm with his mother, a grade school teacher, and his father, a World War II veteran and member of the U.S. Army Reserves. Though the family lost the farm to bankruptcy, David was given an opportunity through education. He earned a bachelor's degree from Furham University and a master's in business administration from the Wharton School of Business by taking out student loans. It was in graduate school that he met his wife, June, and opened his first store selling soda and beer. Through a lot of hard work and good fortune, that single store grew into a business with more than 200 stores now in 24 states and 7,000 employees nationwide. 650 of those employees are located right here in Maryland. It is this expertise in business and management that David brings to his time in Congress. David lives in Montgomery County, but has been a frequent visitor to Allegany and Garrett County, and he resides there with his wife, June. They have 4 children. Please welcome David Trone.
Good morning, everybody. Courtney, thank you very much for the introduction. And it's tough to follow the 2 U.S. senators, but we'll try and make do the best we can. As I mentioned, I come from a different world, and it's a business world. It's not a political world. So this is a new job for me. But I think that I've really been focused on getting stuff done. And getting stuff done is what you learn when you grow up on a farm and you grow up in a rural area. Because at the end of the day, you know, you've got to accomplish it yourself or nothing happened. And it wasn't a good day. So we're setting goals and working to move forward together. And I want to thank the chairman today, Jeremy Irons. Thank you from Allegany and Sean Bender from Garrett. We appreciate you guys putting this event together. It's a great event. It's my 3rd year here, and we really enjoy it always. But I also want to thank the state delegation because it's so crucial for us to accomplish what we need to get done is we've got to connect local, state, and federal. We've got to work with our county commissioners. We've got to work with our mayors. And we've got to work with our Annapolis delegation because we all have the same constituents. We all have the same customers. And if we don't pull together, we've got no chance of making substantial progress on the myriad of issues that are facing Mountain Maryland and America. We have so much to do. but your cooperation in helping us listen and learn what the problems are is absolutely crucial. So 1 year into this office, it's been a real honor to serve Western Maryland. Well, it's time to highlight that Western Maryland has not been forgotten. As mentioned, I grew up on a farm. We had 200 acres, 55,000 chickens, and 600 hogs. And our town had less than 1,000 people. We had one stoplight, and the fire companies revolved around the nucleus of our town in Adams County, Pennsylvania. I understand and lived and loved my farm, the small town we grew up in, the high school that had 80 kids that graduated. But that's where we come from. Unfortunately, that didn't work out, and we moved on and rebuilt. And that can only happen here in America. We can start with zero and build something by just perseverance, hard work, and building a team around them. So we focused in this congressional first year on building a team that can represent the entire district. We opened 4 offices. No one's ever had an office in Cumberland before. We put one in Cumberland, Hagerstown, Frederick, and Gaithersburg. If we're not in the district where the customers are, where the constituents are, we're not going to be able to solve the problems. So I want to mention also 2 of my folks that are here in the room. Taylor, could you and Sarah wave? So they're full-time up in Mountain, Maryland and Washington County. So we're there to serve you. We need your input. We need what the problems are so we can work on resolutions for them. I promised when we opened up we'd focus on Western Maryland because those are folks that need the assistance, how we can help on broadband, how we can help on physical highways, how we can help on opioids and addiction, how we can help on jobs. In the first year, we held workshops on the opioid epidemic. We convened roundtables on agriculture, broadband, and jobs. We toured hospitals, businesses, first responders, schools, community centers. And we promised we'd work to fight the opioid addiction epidemic. I started a bipartisan group in Congress. We have 64 members now from 31 states. And together we meet ongoing. I drive the group, and we drive the group for bipartisan legislation that's going to make America better. 68,000 people died last year from opioids. 49,000 of those were fentanyl. I lost a nephew. So many of you in this room have lost people. We've all lost. The families have all suffered, and it ought to be job one. There's a lot of BS that happens in Washington, an awful lot of BS. But we ought to come away with some tangible things that actually helped people, actually helped their families. And that's what we can do, and that's what we're doing. But we have to do it bipartisan. Because otherwise, in this broken system, nothing will actually come to fruition. It's got to work together. Work across the aisle, like we work with local, state, and federal officials together. A team. It's got to be Team Maryland. Pulling together to help each other and trying to take our differences and put them in the back seat so we can focus on our commonalities to help those that are the most vulnerable, those that need a second chance in our criminal justice system, where we've put folks that are addicted in jail, rather than say, that's a disease, and we can reach out and help find cures and help them fight their way back and help their families fight their way back. We also have focused hard on the business piece. We need to be a voice for business. I understand business inside and out. When 675 workers at Luke and the community were blindsided by Verso, and they announced they'd shut down the mill, coming out of the business world, that's not how you do business. You don't take away jobs, and all the jobs upstream and downstream. You don't not communicate with the community. And you don't use a vote by the workers to certify a union, which helped put their entire system for their plants in the Midwest over the top because of the strong support for the contract out of Verso, for the Verso contract in Luke. That strong support in Luke made the entire contract pass across the country because they offered Luke a special incentive in future years. An incentive they never got because they were terminated. And we need to be upset and mad and passionate when things like that happen. So we work together with our senators. They've been fantastic. I spent a lot of phone calls with the CEO at Verso and expressed our severe displeasure and tried to help out with the men with the TAA, work with other businesses in the area how to pick up those jobs, but they'll never come back. When I visited the mill the day it happened, we walked the mill, we talked to the members of the union, the steel workers. They've been there 30, 35 years, 2, 3 generations. It changed the area forever, 100 plus years. But that's not how business should operate. We put together a bill called the Fair Warning Act with Tim Ryan from Ohio that has passed the House and we'll get it through the Senate. But what it does is it says you have to give warning in writing. You have to say what exactly the benefits, the terms will be of separation. And most importantly, it puts teeth behind it. If business doesn't cooperate, the fines are horrendous. But that's what we need to do. We need to have a way to make sure business treats the workers fairly. We've also worked hard on broadband. Broadband is the key. It's the digital highway that we need to drive jobs and more jobs. If we don't have broadband moving in a good direction, it's not going to happen. We fought for $640 million in broadband expansion in this year's spending budget. We helped get a $2.9 million grant to Garrett County to help drive broadband. But without fast, high-speed broadband that really works, businesses can't come to Allegany and Garrett and enjoy the phenomenal lifestyle that's there. Because to enjoy that lifestyle, we've still got to be connected. So broadband's the key. So we're going to continue to work on it, continue to drive it. But at the same time, we have to strengthen our physical highways. Our physical infrastructure, our digital infrastructure have to work together. 219 has to come together. We've been building support for the Appalachian Highway System. We brought in, as Senator Cardin and Senator Van Hollen mentioned, $100 million. It's the first time in over a decade that that's been funded. There's another $400+ million out there that we've discovered is in other states that build all their highways. But the money's still sitting there, appropriated. So we've got to figure out, and we are working on legislation, to take those dollars back, put them into the Appalachian Fund so they can be redistributed. So we can work and help in Pennsylvania. Because, yeah, we're Team Maryland, but more than that, we're Team America. Because we got to build it together, and that's Pennsylvania, Maryland, West Virginia, working together. So we partnered with Congressman John Joyce, Republican from Pennsylvania, David from over in West Virginia. So between David and John, I've got two great partners. They work with me at all my opioid legislation. They're wonderful partners, McKinley and Joyce. As a matter of fact, John Joyce is probably my lead guy on opioids. He's also a doctor, and he's from southern Pennsylvania. And if we can fix 219 in Pennsylvania, we can connect it in Maryland into West Virginia and build the business corridor. So during our second year, we're going to continue to fight and work with our state and local partners. The times of forgetting Western Maryland, those have to be over. We've never taken a dime from PACs and lobbyists. I don't want to be their congressman. I don't care about them. I want to work for you guys and make a better Maryland. More importantly, also a better country. A country that wants to reach out and help those that are vulnerable. Help those that are suffering and have gotten a short deal. Those with opioids and addiction, and those with mental health. All those Americans that are suffering from depression, anxiety, which co-occurs with opioids almost 70% of the time. That's an America that we can work together across party lines, and we can really make a difference and get past the BS that really infects Washington. We've got to look for things where we can be on the same page and really make a concrete difference. And those are the areas you can count on us to continue to work on and continue to focus. And thank you for your partnership.
Thank you, Congressman Trone. The gift for Congressman Trone and the comptroller, who will be speaking next, are hand-woven baskets made by Judy Simpson of Pleasant Valley Woodcrafts, and they're filled with the apple butter and honey that I spoke about earlier. Always a popular choice. Our next speaker, the Honorable Peter Franchot, has served as Maryland's 33rd comptroller since 2007. First elected to his current post in 2006, Comptroller Franchot has been reelected 3 times, most recently in 2018, during which he garnered 1.6 million votes, the highest number of votes casted for any candidate for state government in Maryland history. As Maryland's Chief Fiscal Officer, Comptroller Franchot is a tireless champion for working families and small businesses and is a stalwart advocate for fiscal policies that strengthen our state's economy. As Chief Executive Officer of an 1,100-person state agency, Comptroller Franchot is focused on delivering respectful, responsive, and results-oriented taxpayer service, and the Maryland Comptroller's Office under his leadership is considered one of the most effective and efficient comptroller's offices in the nation. The Constitution and the laws of Maryland also charge Comptroller Franchot with other critical duties, including regulating alcohol, motor fuel, and tobacco, and a seat on the Board of Public Works, which is comprised of the Governor and State Treasurer, and is responsible for approving and reviewing billions of dollars in state contracts annually, and as a Vice Chair of the State Retirement Agency. Prior to his election to statewide office, Comptroller Franchot served 20 years in the House of Delegates, representing the residents of Montgomery County. He served on the House Appropriations Committee and chaired its Transportation and Environment Subcommittee. And throughout his career, he's been a strong advocate for education, healthcare, transportation, and environmental protection initiatives. Please welcome Comptroller Franchot, a frequent visitor to our breakfast.
Thank you. Yes, well, I'm delighted with that introduction. Thank you, Courtney. And anybody seen Al Feldstein recently? Yeah, he's a great guy. But my staff was always concerned about my safety with his introductions. But I want to say how delighted I am to be with everybody and my good friends Wendell and Mike and Jason. And I see Neil is visiting us from our table, and obviously the Senate President. And then a very special person that I wish was in Washington, frankly, Senator Edwards. I'm not supposed to get into partisan politics. I'm just saying George is someone who's in politics for the right reason, and I really appreciate him. And then the chair of the State Retirement Board of Trustees and the treasurer of the great state of Maryland and a member of the Board of Public Works is right here. Please give a welcome to Nancy Cobb. So I met with the Greater Cumberland Committee yesterday, very distinguished group, tremendous turnout. I asked them to give my best greetings to Adrienne Ottaviani, if you see her. She's got that great restaurant that I go to all the time with the Italian wedding soup she gives me, but she's got some health problems with her husband, I think. Give her a big hug for me if you see her. And if you get down in the dumps at all out there in Western Maryland, would you please go see Sean and Corey McCaw at 1812 Brewery and have a cold Maryland craft beer on me. I'm happy to pay for it. But it'll restore your faith in the business economy, and obviously you have all of the attendance of the major officials in the state, and appreciate the congressmen and the senators Van Hollen and Cardin who are here. I have a nice speech which says how great it is that everybody's here. And I obviously believe that. We had some good talks about the I-68 Alliance and the Appalachian Highway yesterday, and folks have lots of different suggestions. And obviously the federal folks are taking the leadership on most of those bipartisan relationships. But I wanted to thank PACE particularly and your chairs, because the fact that you're down here, the fact that it's a standing room only crowd, fact that your reception last night, I'm not sure if you actually do you offer paid gifts or something to people? It's like an unbelievable turnout, the #1 reception of the year as far as I'm concerned. So anyway, I have come often to Western Maryland. My encounters with residents and businesses over the years have always given me a special appreciation for Western Maryland. I talk a lot about the genius of the private sector system, and it's a quirky system we have in Maryland and the country. It's called free enterprise. Capitalism. It's got its flaws. It's not perfect, but it's a system that actually works, provided we can understand how to manage it and improve it where there are challenges. So Western Maryland has always been something that's given me a valuable perspective. I spend a lot of time out there. I've traveled 800,000 miles. Don't feel too sorry for me. I get driven, but trust me, I know where most of the potholes are. And it's worth coming out. So I'll be out in a couple of weeks to see Allegheny College and also see some of my friends in Cumberland, and where I can work on initiatives together, I will absolutely do that. I've always been a champion for folks that feel as if sometimes they're not completely front and center as far as the state policy. Speaking of state policy, since I have the new Senate president here, who is, such a breath of fresh air in Annapolis, let me just suggest what it is that allows me to be successful around the state. I happen to believe that if government at all levels could just do the little things, that would help a lot with what's going on in the country and the state. Because frankly, we've lost the trust and confidence of some of our citizens. So if we could fix the potholes and pick up the trash, air condition the classrooms and heat the classrooms where our kids are freezing because they don't have just the basics. And in the comptroller's office, we answer 800,000 phone calls annually to our 800 number. We answer with a live, friendly, professional voice within 40 seconds. Or we try to. That's the goal. So maybe all state agencies and all local agencies could get someone promptly on the phone to help our citizens. I think that would go a long way to repairing some of the skepticism that people have for their governments at all levels. And it would allow us to do some significant things. I have a vision, actually, of fundamental economic reform for this state, fundamental fiscal policy reform, fundamental political reform. But you can't introduce big, bold ideas unless you have the trust and confidence of the people. So much as I love to talk about Western Maryland simply with your goals and your agendas and your things, we have a big state, it's a diverse state, and I think we can improve it dramatically over the next few years. Economically, I'm talking about having the private sector take the lead role in producing jobs and wages for our citizens. Government, we have to regulate, we have to oversee, we have to protect the public health, but we should be a constructive junior partner, not getting in the way of the private sector saying, stop, you can't do this. We need to promote innovation and entrepreneurship. On the fiscal policies, we simply cannot add new expensive programs to the state budget as if they were Christmas ornaments on a tree. We have to realize that it's not how much money we're spending we should be taking credit for. It is, what are the results? And once we focus on the results and stop going to the citizens and saying, look how courageous we are, we raised your taxes and we're spending more of your money on something that sounds terrific and that we all support conceptually, let's go to them and say, okay, here are the results we're getting with the existing money. And then you can begin to explore reforms that make sense. On the political side, it just drives me crazy that we have 800,000 young people primarily in the state of Maryland that are prohibited from voting in the primaries. These are folks that don't sign up for my party when they register because they think we're fiscally irresponsible. They don't sign up for Republican because they don't like their cultural harshness or what they perceive as that. So they're unenrolled, they're independents, and under Maryland policies, they're not allowed to vote in the most important elections that we have, which are our primaries. So we need to open that up. And then finally on redistricting, which I hear a lot about, we need independent redistricting commissions. God bless Governor Hogan for promoting that, and I know everybody wants to have a commission. There's no such thing as an independent commission. I kiddingly say, why don't we have an independent computer do redistricting? And people say, well, you have to program the computer. Okay, well, let's program it by saying we need common sense legislative and congressional districts. We need geographically compact districts. And we need to have like-minded communities in these districts. There's a step forward that I think would put Maryland on the map. And I'll just finish by saying it's not just Western Maryland we're trying to promote, it's the entire state we're trying to promote to the rest of the country, not as something that's known for its challenges, which there are a lot of headlines around the country. We want Maryland to be known to young people with talent and energy around the country as a go-to state. We want them to come to our state and share their talent and their innovation. And we want our current young people in the state to stay here. So we have to do things that are big and bold and exciting and inclusive to attract them. And it's obviously Western Maryland benefits, but the entire state benefits from that. So I've bored you with all that. It's a long-winded way of saying I love you guys dearly. I'm happy to be here. I'm very optimistic about the future. All these new millennials that we're going to attract to our state, I will be at the border with a cold Maryland craft beer, welcoming each of them. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Courtney. I appreciate that. And you'll be pleased to hear I'm not telling any jokes, because I tell them all the time, and some of you kid me about my dry humor. But I do have a little story, quick. We have a certain member of our delegation that gets stopped by the police once in a while. I'm not going to mention any name.
Okay.
But there was this person, you know, they had construction there in Cumberland, just east of Cumberland, fixing the bridge up. And they have these speed limit signs. They tell you to slow down. They got this little car sitting over here, and if you're going over the speed limit, a light flashes. Takes a picture of your license plate, and you get something in the mail that says you were speeding and you owe so much money to the state of Maryland. Well, this person went by, saw the light flash, looked at his speedometer. Well, I'm not speeding. I'm going to do this again. So he turned around, he did it 5 times, and each time he went 5 miles an hour slower, and the light flicked. He said, this is screwed up. And he wrote down each time how fast he was going after he got through there. So he said, when I get something in the mail, I got something to justify that the camera's wrong. So about 2 weeks later, something comes from the state of Maryland to this person, opens it up, and said, you're being fined 5 times for not wearing your seatbelt. Now, that wasn't me. And we have 3 delegates, so I'll let you try to pick who it is.
Guilty as a picture.
Well, I'm glad you all laughed. You got to lighten up a little bit around this place, you'd go crazy. But welcome to Annapolis. So I got up on the floor and I asked my senators to come over, fellow senators to come over, and I said, Thursday, I guess it was, invited them to the reception. And I said, hundreds of people as I speak are coming from the mountains of Maryland, converging on the capital city of the state of Maryland. And I said, they come in peace. Because you never know what some people down here might think when you got a bunch of mountain people coming down here. But it's my honor and pleasure to introduce a gentleman today that I think you're all going to really like and get to know a lot better and work with him. I've known him since he came into the legislature. I think he came right out of college. Someone commented, I'm not going to put him on the spot of what his age was, but I think someone commented President Miller was president of the Senate longer than he's been in this world. But he's a great guy. He knows our part of the state. And you know, the Democrats got together because they kind of run the legislature before we got in session and picked our new president. At that time, kind of president-elect, because we didn't vote till we came into session. But we got a unanimous vote and actually got a second from one of our leaders in the Republican caucus. And we served on the same committee. He's been to our neck of the woods. He understands our neck of the woods. He's going to come out there more often, because if he doesn't, I'm going to get on him. But I know better. He'll be there. He'll be there. But he's a great guy. It's my honor and pleasure today to introduce you to the new president of the Senate, Senator Bill Ferguson.
I'll take president of the center. That's a good place to be these days, let me tell you. Following Senator Edwards is always a heavy task. You know, it's you all know George very well. You know, I know you all know him very personally. He is such a champion for Western Maryland, but we know him in a different way. You know, in the Maryland Senate, it's a different place. The goal is to get stuff done, but of course we have senators who really like to talk and hear themselves, and you sort of know who those senators are, and when they get up, you kind of start see people open up their laptops and looking and seeing. When Senator Edwards gets up, people stop. They get quiet, and they listen. Because when Senator Edwards is speaking, he knows what he's talking about. It comes from his heart, and he's fighting for his community. And that is the best of what happens in Annapolis. That is who we are. That's what we're about. And so it is such an honor and privilege to have learned from him and to continue to learn from him as he represents you so ably and honorably here in our state capitol. And you know, alongside with Senator Serafini, who I know hoped to be here today, but has been struggling with this terrible cold, and He is. I've been texting with him on a daily basis, and he so wish he were able to be here. But as well, having two Western Maryland senators on budget and tax, the Western Maryland, there's some good eyes watching out for the future of Western Maryland. Thank you all, and thank you to the delegates as well. Thank you to PACE for having me. This has been quite an experience thus far, following somebody that's been here for 33 years. Before I do that, I, of course, obligatory in any of these remarks to groups of folks is, what is my most recent connection to Western Maryland? And actually, it was pretty frequent. It was relatively recent. At Thanksgiving, after this whole chaos of a president's election nomination, my amazing wife had really picked up a lot of the slack as I had been traveling around the state. And so I said, you know what, Leah, you really deserve some time off. I'm going to take the kids for a long weekend after Thanksgiving, and we're going to go out to Western Maryland and kind of get out there. And so she said, thank you. That's step one of 100 steps left, but we'll take it. So I have a 5 and 7-year-old, and we live obviously in downtown Baltimore City in Patterson Park, and we went out to Western Maryland, out to Deep Creek Lake. And, it was this quiet weekend, and we went and did some hiking, and, I sent Senator Edwards this picture, and it's probably going to be impossible to see, but we went out on the, I can't remember the name of the trail that's right around by the ski slopes. But in any case, I don't know if folks can be able to see this right here, but here's Caleb and Cora standing in front of what is Danger Bear Trap. So, I thought I was this really cool dad taking my 5 and 7-year-old, and look like this cool bear trap, and they thought it was great. We took this picture, we sent it, and Leah's not there, so I'm in charge, and it was great. We had this great day. At about 2:00 in the morning that night, I have my 5-year-old jump out of bed, screaming at the top of her lungs, runs into my room and says, "Daddy, is the bear coming to eat me?" Thankfully, no. These are some city kids who were getting some experience of the great outdoors and understanding Mountain Maryland. It's one of these things that it is just amazing the different, how natural it was for me having had experiences across the state. But for two city kids, seeing the concept of a bear trap was this mind-blowing experience. And so on one hand, it's very clear that there's these huge differences across our state. But I would say one of the things that I found remarkably true in the state of Maryland and in the Maryland Senate, particularly working with Senator Serafini and Senator Edwards, is that what brings the challenges that we experience are so remarkably similar. They play out in different ways. What happens in Baltimore City, what happens in the urban centers, and the challenges we have in urban centers, they are applied a bit differently in Western Maryland, but they are remarkably the same. You take school construction, right? I know this is a major issue right now in Allegany and Garrett. It's a very similar issue that we're struggling with in the city. The calculation of how we figure out what is really wealth, what should be the state's appropriate investment in the construction of our new public schools. In the city, we're struggling with the exact same issue that Garrett County is struggling with. Last year, we had a bill about opportunity zones that the governor put forward, and at the General Assembly used and created a program. And the things that we were fighting for in Baltimore were the exact same things that Senator Edwards and Senator Serafini needed in Allegany and Garrett. So what I've learned in my 10 years in the legislature is that it's very easy to get distracted by a lot of the tit-for-tat political partisan stuff that we often see being covered. At the end of the day, our best work is when we come together to solve very real problems. And our problems are very often the same. This session we have about, I think it's 75 days left. I will say there is one core challenge that we have got to address. We won't solve it, but we have to get down the road. Right now today in the state of Maryland, 10 years after our Maryland high school graduates leave high school across the state as an average, only less than 1 out of every 4 of them is earning an AA degree, a BA degree, or an industry recognized credential. Over that very same time period of 10 years, 2 out of 3 jobs that were created in the state of Maryland require, just to even apply, an AA degree, a BA degree, or an industry recognized credential. 1 out of 4 of our Maryland public high school graduates are earning that. 2 out of 3 jobs require it to even apply. That's not an education problem. That is an economic calamity if we don't do something about it. The good news is we know what to do. It's not easy, but there are templates for how to get there. It's not about just funding. Of course, there are places where we are going to have to enhance our practice, make new investments around early childhood, ensuring that kids who live in concentrated poverty have quality time and enrichment after school and during the summer so that they have something productive to do and not sit in front of a television. Those things do cost money, but it's not just about the money. It's about truly believing that every child in this state should have the opportunity to maximize his or her potential. We will do it accountably. We will do it with clear governance. We will do it with checks in the system so it's not money that just gets flowing, hoping that some result happens, but that there's real accountability along the way. But if we do not address this factual reality that less than 40% of the kids in Maryland high schools can read at a 10th grade level or do Algebra 1, if we don't do something about that, that is a massive societal crisis on our horizon. But this session we will. And we're going to do it in a way that is bipartisan, that is thoughtful, and that is responsible. This is one of those moments for Maryland where we get the opportunity to really define who we are. And I believe in my core that Marylanders, who they are, what we have always been for the last 200 years, we're problem solvers. And that's what we're going to do this session. I thank you all so much for your commitment to this state. We live in an unbelievably, incredibly blessed geographic location with unbelievable assets from the Chesapeake to the mountains. We have it all. This is such an amazing place to raise a family. And it's because of each and every one of you who care so passionately about your neighborhoods and your communities. And it is such an honor to be able to work with your representatives to make sure that all of our futures are better. Thank you all very much. And please stay in touch with us. And thank you for the maple syrup.
And so the gift for Senator Ferguson is a handcrafted wooden plate, which features a variety of local woods in a horizontal stripe design. And it's provided by Mike Simpson from Pleasant Valley Woodcrafts in Garrett County. And the maple syrup comes from S&S Maple Camp, the largest maple syrup producer in the state of Maryland, which is located in Allegany County. And I was not snubbing Senator Edwards. When we spoke earlier this morning, he told me he did not need an introduction. We have had a tremendous lineup of speakers today, and it was one of our concerns as a committee early on with everything going on in Washington about who would be available. And I think it shows a tremendous commitment to Western Maryland that we were able to have all of our congressional representatives here with us today. So thank you, as well as the Comptroller and Senator Ferguson. As many of you have been involved in planning an event of this magnitude, you understand the planning and work that goes into something like this behind the scenes to make it a success. And so for many of our PACE committee members, this has become a labor of love, and it reflects their steadfast commitment to Mountain Maryland. If I could please have the members of the PACE committee stand to be recognized. And of course, special recognition to Jeremy Bender, Beitzel Corporation. I'm sorry, Sean Bender, Beitzel Corporation, Jeremy Irons, the Belt Group, our wonderful co-chairs, and Katie Kenny with Exclamation Lab, who's really the glue that keeps us together. I want to thank everyone for coming. I encourage you to foster the connections you've made over the last 2 days and to continue to promote Mountain Maryland, because we really do need everyone working together to make it the best possible place to live, work, and raise a family. I want to thank you for your support. I encourage you to mingle and network with people here before you head back to Western Maryland, and we hope to see you again next year. Thank you.